For you today. Over to you, Alan.
Good afternoon. I'm Alan Stewart. I've been at Sins for the last 2 years, and I currently work at Waimate Cafe, which is on Tree Grounds in Waitangi. And in a couple of weeks I'll be moving to Melbourne to work at Maze, which is one of Gordon Ramsay's newest restaurants. And beside me I have the very gorgeous and very lovely Megan Anderson.
No. Alright, so we're going to get started cooking. First of all, I have to start with my lamb. I've got garlic and herb rub, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to chop up my herbs and my garlic and pretty much rub it all over my lamb.
And I will start by making tomato jelly. So I'm going to take tomato paste, glucose, which is cornstarch syrup.
Now this dish that Alan is cooking is our dish that we did for Toque last year, which is a pretty big competition in Auckland. And we got a gold medal with this, so I guess we're pretty proud.
Hope it looks as good as it did on the day. So I'm going to put a little bit of water in as well, and a bit of agar, which is seaweed, which is a bit of a setting agent. So that goes.
The difference between agar and gelatin is basically that agar is from seaweed, and so it's suitable for vegetarians. Gelatin is obviously from animals, and it melts under heat, which agar doesn't, which is really great, especially in this lovely tent, which is sweltering, by the way.
The important thing with agar is that you need to bring it to the boil so that it sets, otherwise it won't set correctly. So I'm going to start on my anchovy mayonnaise. I'm going to poach my eggs once my water gets to the boil.
I've got some over here.
Should be right now.
Are you vinegaring your water, Alan?
I have indeed.
That just helps the white to set so that it doesn't spread out everywhere and you end up with just spaghetti egg, really. Now everything that we're doing today, we have printed off recipes and stuff, so feel free to come up the front and take a copy.
So I've just put the eggs into water. I'm not going to fully poach them, so the white's still going to be a bit runny, but once put into the blender it's going to emulsify with the oil, and so it'll make a nice mayonnaise, hopefully.
Oh no, please tell us the story about the cup.
What we have up front here is 2 trophies that actually Alan won this year. One is the Commie Chef of the Year trophy for the Northland Salon Culinaire, so the Northland cooking competitions. Commie Chef of the Year is a fairly big competition, 3 events, 1 live event and 2 what they call statics. A static event is where the chef makes the food in advance and presents it, and it's all about presentation and attention to detail. Static events are actually significantly harder to do than a live cooking event because the judges expect perfection. So Alan competed in 3 events and managed to win that at the regionals, and from there went to the national competitions this year, did the same 3 dishes and came away with Commie Chef of the Year. So we're really proud of Alan, and quite a big deal for a Northland chef to win Commie Chef of the Year as far as I'm aware, first time ever.
So my eggs are pretty much done, so I'm going to take them out. So the white's still runny, the yolk's still runny, but it's going to be alright once I put it into the blender.
And I'm just starting making pesto over here. So I'm doing it the old-fashioned way with a pestle and mortar. A bit of hard work, but definitely worth it. So I've got some basil going in there, along with some parmesan. And I'm also going to put some garlic and toasted pine nuts in there.
Okay, so my jelly's done as well. So ideally you want to put it in the fridge for half an hour to an hour, and it should set up. It's pretty quick, it sets up a bit quicker than gelatine, so it's pretty good if you're in a rush.
Where's the fridge then, Alan?
Located below us, it's hidden.
Always a bit of a challenge these days, trying to cook obviously in a tent. It's fairly warm without all the toys we're used to in a kitchen. So, and the way Alan and Megan have approached this today, Alan's doing a competition dish, and it is quite a technical, advanced type of dish to demonstrate the kind of food that we look to produce for competitions, whereas Megan's doing something a little simpler, more suited to home cookery, the kind of things that you might want to make at home. Not that I'm saying don't try Alan's dish at home, but just be prepared to do a little bit of work.
A lot of work and a lot of practice.
Okay, so I'll take garlic and I'll put it into the mayo. So what I've done is I've just blitzed the eggs in the blender. I'll take a bit of hot English mustard. Condensed milk, so it's a bit old-fashioned the way we're doing the mayo today. But with the condensed milk, the mayo is quite sweet, so it's a nice contrast to the rest of the dish.
One of the other reasons behind the use of the condensed milk in this dish is that for Toque dOr, it's a heavily sponsored competition, and we're required to use specific items of sponsors' product, the Nestle condensed milk being one of those products. So we're trying to use it in an interesting and innovative way, hence the use of it in his mayonnaise.
So I'm going to put some anchovies in there, so 3 anchovies, and I'm going to take the oil that's at the bottom of the anchovy container, I'm just going to add it to it as well, so you get more of an anchovy flavour.
Also a good binder.
Yeah.
Okay, so after about half an hour of grueling work, you finally get a paste with the old pesto. It's so easy to buy at the supermarket nowadays though. You can taste the difference, and I encourage everyone to make everything that they possibly can at home with, the time that they have.
The other advantage, if you're in season and you get basil at a good price, not quite yet, but in about another month or two, basil will come down in price, and it's just way cheaper to make your own than it is to buy pesto. It also freezes very well, so one of the things we'll often do in a restaurant is we might buy 5 kilo of basil. Everyone's seen 5 kilo of basil.
It looks about 50 kg.
Yeah, it'll cover the top of this table. We blend that all up and freeze it down so that we have it all year. So you'll make it, while the basil's cheap, and then you can keep it for a long time. And so what Alan's doing over here is finishing off his mayonnaise. One of the tricks of making mayonnaise is you're actually emulsifying the oil into the vinegar. In other words, you're joining a liquid and a fat, which would normally just separate or split out. And what it means is he has to blend it and keep adding the oil slowly. If he adds the oil too quickly, it will split and go all curdly, and which is not what we're after.
Okay, so with my lamb dish, I am serving nice asparagus, which has just come into season and is absolutely beautiful. Everyone knows the old snap trick, don't they? And what I do with my ones is actually...
What's the snap trick?
You snap the ends so you don't get that woody, horrible part.
And why do I snap it, not cut it?
Because it'll snap in the right place, no. Now I'm going to pull off the ears just because they're, it looks prettier and you get a bit of colour on it, and who wants to eat the sort of gnarly end bits anyway?
Right, so my mayonnaise done. I'm going to use most chef's secret ingredient, which is salt. So just going to season it up.
The use of salt is something that we push pretty hard at the Culinary Institute. I know there's a drive to reduce salt in people's diet, but as chefs, we want our food to taste as good as possible, and accurately seasoning food is a critical thing. If you don't season it, it really has very little flavour, so adding enough salt just to bring out flavour is critical, really important.
So my mayonnaise is done now. It's a little thin, but if I want to take it thicker, all I need to do is add oil, ensure it thickens up.
I've just started slicing up some tomatoes here. They're little cherry tomatoes, so they're absolutely beautiful. I'm cutting them across so that when you pick them up and look at them, they're little sort of star shapes. And I am going to put some salt and pepper on them and slow roast them so they're nice and sweet. Great contrast to the pesto.
So here I have a nice side of acari salmon. So I'm going to take the belly off, this bottom piece, and I'm just going to trim the top. I'm going to take them into nice square pieces. Now, usually you'd save the trim, especially in a restaurant, for food costs. So you can make it into a mousse, which is what I'm going to do today.
So what else has been done to that salmon, Alan, before you started chopping it up?
I've pin boned it, which quite often there's pins that run about from halfway all the way to the ends and on the side as well. I've also scaled it, so the scale's pretty small, but they do need to come off, otherwise they don't taste nice. So all I've done is remove the belly, and now I'm going to cut it into squares.
Front one.
So I've got a nice square piece of salmon like that, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 cut marks into it, just into the skin, and that's going to give a nice appearance when you've cooked it, and it's also going to allow for the heat to get through. And I'm also going to, again, use chef's favourite ingredient, salt, and season it.
So I'm just starting to get my pan nice and hot because I'm about to start cooking my lamb fillet. Now they're very thin, so we have to be careful not to overcook them, so you need a really hot pan. I've also put my pasta in there, and I've cooked orzo a couple of times, and I know with this particular one that it takes 8 minutes to cook. So I've got my handy dandy timer on and ready to go with a sieve.
So Megan, earlier you talked about slow roasting your tomatoes. What did you mean by that?
I put them in the oven at about 120 and just really let them tick away and kind of dehydrate a little bit. You get quite an intense flavour, and it's quite special, I think.
Right, so next I'm going to take the shrimp from the salmon. And I'm going to make salmon mousse. So all it is salmon shrimp. I'm just going to blitz it up. So it doesn't need to be really fine because you need a bit of texture there to cling to the quail's egg. So, and I'm also going to add a bit of tapioca starch, which comes from a root and it's made into a flour. And that's just going to help bind to the mousse.
And one of the reasons that Ellen needs to add a bit of corn flour or tapioca flour to this is that salmon is very fatty, and it will, because of the high fat content, the mousse tends to split out a little bit on it. If you were using a less fatty fish to do this, you could actually blend it without that starch.
I'm also going to use lemon zest instead of lemon juice, because we put lemon juice into a mousse, it quite often splits out because of the acidity. So just add that. And then again, salt.
Okay.
So Ellen, Megan looks like she's about ready to serve her dish in five minutes or so. You reckon you're going to be there at the same time?
No, I jump over and help, you see. We are a team.
No pressure, Ellen.
Okay, so I've lightly blitzed the mousse. It's not fine. I'm not going to pass it, otherwise it will be far too fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a piece of cling film, or glad wrap in New Zealand.
While Ellen's doing that, Megan's cooking her lamb.
Very careful not to overcook this. They're so small, but you know, they're quite juicy and they have great lamb flavour, as all us Kiwis love.
And so by overcook, what do you mean? How are you going to cook these?
I'm going to cook these medium rare, fingers crossed, with this little gas furnace.
And basically with these lamb fillets, if you cook them too much further than medium rare, they're going to be dry and tough and not have very good flavour. So really medium rare is perfect. Anything less than that and they tend to be a little tough, although the flavour's still good.
Okay, so I've taken the salmon mousse and I've spread it out on some cling film. Reasonably thin so that it's not too chunky around the egg. So sadly we weren't able to get quail's eggs today, so I've got bantam egg. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the salmon mousse and take cling film. I'm going to use it to wrap the egg.
We're going to pané this, so we're going to dip it in egg wash and then put breadcrumbs on it. And then it will be deep fried. So it looks really cool. I mean, obviously you'll see it, but it'll be, you cut through the salmon, which is bright pink, and then into the egg, which should still be running in the middle.
Hopefully.
So what Alan's doing is a little play on a Scotch egg here. But a Scotch egg would normally have beef mince wrapped around it. Here we're doing it with a little quail's egg, or actually a bantam egg, and salmon. So it's a play on a Scotch egg. And one of the reasons we do this in a competition is judges are looking for innovative use of a sponsor's product. Sponsor's product is being the salmon. And Alan's going to fry some salmon, but he's also using the trim to make this mousse. So he's showing that he's got another use for it. Basically showing technical skill. It's also very pretty, it works really well on the dish.
Okay, so I've kind of bunched the cling film up so you get a nice round shape around the egg, and hopefully it will be even, so you don't want thick splotches around it, otherwise it's not going to cook evenly when you put it into the deep fry. So...
And what he's aiming to do, if he gets it right, and he's had enough practice, so he should, is the salmon should be perfectly cooked and the egg on the inside should just be nice and runny. So no pressure again, Alan.
So I've got egg wash here, so all it is egg that's been beaten up, it's got a tiny little bit of water in it and it's been seasoned. And I've also got breadcrumbs, we didn't get pancake crumbs, which is a bit of a shame, but that's also been seasoned as well. So I'm just going to dip the egg in the egg wash.
It's quite important seasoning. I mean, we like to season at every stage so that you know that it's definitely going to taste as best as it can. You have to try your food. As a cook, it's great because all you do is nibble all day.
So I'm going to give the egg a double pané, which means to coat it twice, because we're going to have panko crumbs. Panko crumbs are a lot thicker and kind of, in my mind, give it a nicer texture to the product and a better look.
Alright, Al, I'm almost ready to play. How are you looking?
So all I've got to do is make my potato and cockle vinaigrette, and then I am pretty much done.
Wonderful.
So how long are you resting your meat for?
Probably about half the time that it was cooking for, so maybe 3 minutes. It's quite small, so it should be okay. We just want to let those juices relax, and so it's really moist and juicy when it comes to eating it.
And it's as a chef, it's one of the critical things, resting meat. Too many people, if there's one mistake that home cooks make, they cook meat and do not rest it. As far as I'm concerned, it's the most important thing when it comes to cooking meat. I'll rest a steak pretty much for 10 minutes. I'll rest a roast for 20 to 30 minutes. And the difference in terms of flavour and texture is massive. Because what it means is that all the juices that are in that meat are allowed to set back into the fibre of the meat. Otherwise, when you cut your meat, it just bleeds out everywhere. I've been to dinner at people's places, they've sliced their roast and there's a swimming pool of blood. That blood's flavour and moisture and juiciness. So by resting it, it just allows those juices to reset into the meat and a massive improvement in quality. The other thing that Megan's doing here when she's resting her meat is just resting it here on a little rack, and that's so it's not sitting in its own juices, which is full of salt. And what happens is the salt will actually, if it's sitting in its own juices with the salt, they'll have to keep pulling moisture out of that meat, so it will keep drying it out. So it's really important when resting it to put it on a rack or something else like that. What I do at home, I just get a butter plate, a bread butter plate, turn it upside down on a main plate, like a dinner plate, and sit my meat on that so I can just run off and pull. That's an easy, quick way of making a resting rack, basically. Sorry, Megan, took over?
Yes, so I'm just passed off my pasta, and it's really good with pasta salads to dress it while it's warm, so it really does absorb all the flavour from your sauce. Now I want mine to be quite a soft, kind of almost risotto-y like, because it looks so similar to rice. And it's going to be really tasty, sort of as a sauce for with the lamb.
Okay, so I'm making a vinaigrette over here, so I've taken black mustard seeds, black mustard, whole grain mustard, shallots, and balsamic vinegar. So usually with vinaigrette, it's 1/3 of acid to 2/3 oil. So all I'm going to do is start twisting it up. Now, important thing when you make vinaigrette is don't add the oil too quick, otherwise it's going to split out and it won't look good. So, nice slowly.
So as I'm plating, I'm making sure that I dress everything in my pesto that I made so lovingly. So I've got some asparagus, which I've just blanched off here. That only takes about 2.5 minutes. It's quite quick, but it's very tasty.
Golden rule of asparagus, don't overcook it. I had bad memories of asparagus from my grandmother. Asparagus you can eat with a straw, so yeah, we don't want that.
Now, if you can see, these are my slow roasted tomatoes. They're still quite moist, but they've got that richer flavour. Something I prepared earlier.
Good trick without an oven.
Yeah.
So I've emulsified the oil with the vinegar, so it goes, so the two ingredients combine, and I'm going to take some diced potato, which has been pre-cooked, sadly, and some cockles, and the juice as well. And then I'm going to take some salmon roe, which gives a nice colour to the vinaigrette.
And an important point here with the salmon roe that Alan's put in there is these are raw. It's like a little salmon egg. The vinegar and the vinaigrette he's making will actually end up pickling them, so you can't add them too early on.
So again, season it so it tastes good.
Now I've just started slicing my lamb, and I want everyone to be able to determine where the grain goes on the meat. Now with my fillet it's quite easy because obviously it's straight, so the grain does go that way. And you want to cut against it so that it's easier to eat. You know, it sort of breaks up in your mouth with your teeth.
If you don't cut the meat the right way, the grain will be very long in it and it'll taste really chewy in the mouth. From my point of view, if I go to a restaurant and somebody's cut a bit of meat wrong, I will actually send my meal back.
Alright, and that's my dish all done.
Right, so I'm about 5 minutes away, so what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to heat my fry pan up. Don't want it smoking, otherwise when I put the salmon in, the skin is going to burn, so we want it reasonably low temperature. I'm also going to put the pan on for my green beans. I'm going to put it into some butter and a little bit of water. I'm just going to glaze the beans. And again, I'm going to season it. So Megan's going to start plating while I finish it off, because the other garnishes on the dish are hot components. So ideally, if you're working in a restaurant, you'd probably have someone working on a hot section that's cooking, and then the head chef will be plating, so the food's always going out warm and hot.
Now this one I've got here is an olive paint, as we call it, which is just dehydrated olive, blended down so they're really fine, and just mixed with a bit of oil. It has a fantastic taste and it looks really cool on this dish.
So I've just put a thin film of oil on the base of the pan, not too much, otherwise you're pretty much going to deep fry the salmon, which is not what you're looking to do. So my butter's slightly warmed up, so the beans have been par cooked already, so they're pretty much ready to go. So what I'm going to do is put them into the chauffant, which is the glaze. Just going to let them warm up in the butter.
So this is the set tomato jelly, and as you can see we've cut it up into nice little dice. And if you can, later on, you should come try it. It's an intense flavour, it's really good.
Right, so the pan's starting to heat up. You can see the oil's starting to run a lot more because it's warm. But I haven't got too high so that's smoking. So what I'm going to do, switch it off. I'll take the salmon, so skin side down into the pan. Always place it away from you so that fat doesn't spit up into you. And I'm just going to hold it down with my hand so that skin grips to the base of the pan. So, important thing with salmon is all about temperature control. If the pan's too hot, then it's going to overcook and the skin's not going to get crispy. But if you've got it too low, then the skin's never going to get crispy, it's just going to go soggy.
So this mayonnaise, we've made it quite runny so that we can put it on our plate. And we sort of drizzle it along so that it's really quite saucy when you try to eat it.
And with the salmon that Alan's cooking, salmon's what we call an oily fish, and an oily fish, if you cook it well done or cooked through, it will taste dry and quite unpleasant. So really what Alan's aiming for here is somewhere between medium rare and medium, probably closer to a medium if you're thinking in terms of a steak, so that it's actually almost marshmallowy in the middle. That's the aim of the game, with the skin being really nice and crisp, so you get this contrast in textures as well as flavours going on your mouth. True of all sorts of fish as well. Like I was talking to somebody the other day, told me that kingfish was horrible to eat. I just couldn't believe it. And when I got talking to him a bit longer, it was because he always cooked it like he cooked a bit of snapper, so it was cooked through. And then straight away it tastes dry, tough, and almost kind of grainy in the mouth. Whereas if you cook a bit of kingfish till it's medium rare, still actually raw in the middle, it is one of the nicest fish in the ocean.
Thanks.
So what are you up to now, Alan?
Right, so the skin is starting to crispen up, still not quite there.
And one of the things Alan's doing here is he's cooking it mostly on the skin side. So probably 80% of the cooking on this case will occur on the skin. He'll flip it over just to cook the other side very quickly, but it'll mostly be the skin side that he's cooking.
Right, so the skin is still not crispy, so I'm just going to turn it down a bit so I don't overcook it. As you probably can't see it, but on the side of it you can start to see that it's starting to cook. So as it goes up, you pretty much want it 3/4 of the way before you turn it over. Otherwise, if you turn it over too soon, then the skin's not going to be crisp and it's going to be overcooked. So, fingers crossed, this egg comes out well.
And if you haven't tried eating fish with the skin on, I really recommend it. Adds a really nice extra flavour to fish and a beautiful texture as well. There's some fish that naturally lend themselves to it. dOr being one particularly. No scales on it. Easiest fish in the world to cook skin on. But even snapper, salmon, pretty much most fish you can cook with the skin on, and it improves it, although it is a little more difficult to cook.
So, Megan's just deep fried the what's meant to be the quail's egg. It's because it's a bantam egg, it's a bit bigger than a quail's egg, so it doesn't quite look right on the plate, but it'll still be alright.
I'll put it on the salmon. Now you see why there's two of us, it's quite fiddly plating up. This is just so it looks pretty. I mean, if you put all the stuff on the plate like you would at home, it would taste amazing, and you know, it still looks great. It's got all the colours, all the flavours.
So Megan's put some micro basil on the plate. Now this comes from Opua, from a lady called Bronnie who owns Sweet As Herbs. They're absolutely gorgeous, perfect for garnish on the plate. They've got quite a bit of flavour, but they're sometimes, as Chris said earlier, they're not really, don't add anything to the dish, they're more just there for colour.
Chef benefit, really. Yep.
So guys, how many times have you done this particular dish before?
A few.
24, 30?
Yeah, we practiced a lot for our competition. And it definitely paid off, and we're happy with that.
The dish you see here, it didn't turn up overnight. It's a little bit of an evolution to get here. I think we must have done something in the vicinity of 20 practices by the time they actually went to compete in Auckland. So this is a well-practiced dish, and one it's a bit of a favourite of ours now. It often turns up on the menu at the Culinary Institute when we do our dinners and things as well. So yeah.
Right, so my salmon's pretty much done. It's nice and crisp on the skin side. So what I'm going to do, as you can see, it's pretty much cooked. What I'm going to do is turn it over, quickly sear it. Should probably take 30 seconds to a minute, if that. Again, I'm just going to add a touch more salt. I'm also going to baste the skin. So basting kind of keeps all the juices in the fish. Right, fingers crossed, we're done.
And we always put it straight onto a paper towel or something just to drain off that excess oil. Don't want it swimming in sun juices on the plate.
Another important thing about when you serve something like this with crisp skin is you don't then go and put a sauce on top of the skin.
No.
Take all the time and effort to make it nice and beautiful and crisp, and then cover it with a wet sauce makes no sense. I have seen this.
Okay, and that's us. So feel free to come up and have a look.
Feel free to have a look, folks, and have a try. Thank you, Alan and Megan, and a couple of names that you should look out for in the future. A couple of New Zealand superstars in the making.